Good morning, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Games. The Week in Games. I haven't decided. I came up with this idea last night, so I haven't given it a title. This is the new show, I guess, every Friday, where I'm going to dive into not the biggest stories in the week in games necessarily, but the ones that sort of, I don't know, interested me throughout everything that happened this week, be it on the lobby at GameSpot, be it on little weird games that I enjoy on the internet. Like I said, if something crazy happens with Final Fantasy, you're probably not going to see it on this thing. But if something happens with Dino Dini's Kickoff, for instance, I'm probably going to talk about it on here. Thank you so much for joining me. The chat is open. I'm going to be keeping a much tighter eye on it than I do when I'm usually playing video games. And I have a bunch of little pieces of news to talk about this week. So to get the ball rolling, actually, the sort of three topics that I want to talk about today are the first piece kind of comes out of an article that Rock Paper Shotgun's John Walker wrote a couple of days ago, I think. I only got word of it yesterday, so I guess it was on Wednesday. Kind of about coming off of the whole Polygon Doom gameplay controversy thing, talking about reviewer skill. I kind of want to throw my lot in on that one. I also want to talk about accessibility a little while, which is not something that I've done a lot of research on recently, but I had done a couple of years ago in relation to Special Effect, a sort of a UK charity that helps disabled people play video games. There's a really good video that went up during the week by Naughty Dog, or by Sony actually I think it was, all about what they did with Uncharted to try and make it accessible. So just want to sort of, start the conversation about that and get your guys' feedback on it. And then outside of that, there was also some rumors that came out of, I saw sort of a gaff thread, which is based on a bunch of Overwatch subreddit threads that I was keeping my eye on for the past little while. So all about a possible leaked character, which we may have been slightly involved in on GameSpot with the video series that I produced last month. So I sort of want to talk about that one a little bit as well. But yeah, to get the ball rolling, let's first of all talk about reviewer skill, shall we? So this is something that comes up, like, I feel like every time a review is posted on any major video game website and the review is not in line with what people think. I mean, I feel like it happens more and more to sort of in 2016, now that we live in an ecosystem in which, let's take something like a strategy game, like a Civilization After Earth, or you could look at a game like Dark Souls, where you have these games, right, which are have relatively high barriers to entry in terms of skill, and also like very high mastery levels where you require people to be, or there is no sort of skill ceiling which most people hit. It's quite expandable. Now that we have YouTube and Twitch, whereas before, sort of like-minded skillful players were there was no real means for them to communicate with each other, or at least on message boards you couldn't really tell if people were of an equal skill. In 2016, it's very easy to like align up with people who are really good at video games. I mean, Overwatch is actually a really good example where, people who are quite skillful at it get a lot of people watching their Twitch streams, and people who are good at obscure games can sort of follow each other in their own little communities, and the internet has basically been set up to do that with video really, really well. And what's kind of happened in the interim, or what's kind of happens to, I guess, sites like GameSpot or any sort of, what would you call it, like a jack of all trades, master on video game editorial team, is that we are in a situation, and sorry, I'm speaking as somebody who works at GameSpot, but I'm not actually on the editorial team. I've only reviewed like 5 games. But we sort of cover games in a different way to a lot of those people, where those folks are, I guess, they're like on these, they play like 1 or 2 games. They're like on these like very specific genre verticals, like an MMO or a like a MOBA thing, or maybe they're like super good into fighting games, and those people are like good authorities on those. Whereas you come to a site like IGN, you come to a site like Polygon, you come to a site like GameSpot, you're talking to people who are sort of not only coming to it from a different perspective of them being skillful writers, and that's how they got in those positions, but also they kind of play everything. So you're kind of like exposed to playing lots of different games. Like, you need to be as good as playing Rocket League perhaps as you do playing like Call of Duty. So this is sort of something that we're used to on big game sites, the idea that like our skill is constantly being questioned. And I don't necessarily think that's a problem. I think that, especially if you were a reviewer working with authority on a website, then that's probably what's going to to happen to you, or probably should be. So John Walker's written this editorial. I'm going to try and do my best to sort of give a summary version of it without changing what he's saying. I suggest you go read it yourself if you can. Hassan's put the link in the chat. Thanks very much, buddy. And it's basically sort of talking about what happened with Polygon's Doom footage, which I think is down here. I actually kind of don't even want to show it because I feel like I'm just adding fuel to the fire. But if you type in Polygon Doom YouTube, I mean, that's probably all you need to see. Somebody posted a bunch of footage, and sort of, I imagine, in the bum rush to get footage up, which, you know, somebody who works on a video team, this is pretty standard, that like the first time you get a bit of gameplay, the first time you get access to a game, you're probably trying to get the gameplay up as quickly as possible. And the footage that's in this video is very much the footage of somebody who has not played Doom yet. And I mean literally has not played Doom yet, because like one of the things that happens at the start is that they end up trying to shoot this gore nest instead of hitting E on it, which is something probably a lot of people do the first time they play the game, and then they realize, oh, you go up and press the use button, and then they never do it again. But unfortunately for this individual, this footage was you know, the first time that they played it. So, you know, you've got somebody playing, you know, they're shooting the gore nest. You've got somebody who's trying to aim with the move button, which again is, you know, if you don't play a lot of first-person shooters, or you're used to playing on mouse and keyboard and you're picking up a controller, that's probably something you're going to do. And long story short, the internet, full of people who don't get paid to play video games, they see that here is somebody who is getting paid to play video games, doing a kind of a crappy job of it. And the vitriol that you expect sort of comes out of that. And I honestly cannot blame them. I don't want to, like, maybe this opens a wider conversation about the skill of people in games. I think what probably happened here as a video producer, I would guess, is that they had somebody who, maybe an intern, maybe somebody who wasn't reviewing the game. I mean, Arthur Gee is reviewing his game. He knows how to play video games. And, you know, the footage just in the let's get it up quick, it was never really, you know, looked at or given much analytical or given much thought. Oh man, I love that. I love when the imps hit each other. Anyway, I don't want to linger on that too much because it's a bit unfair. So that's the sort of reality of that, is that yes, Polygon shouldn't have posted that. I mean, no, I don't even want to show my stuff, but like I put up actually I will, because it's a little bit self-critical. I put up a bunch of Doom footage on GameSpot's YouTube channel around the same time, and my stuff was recorded on here, we'll look at this one. My stuff was recorded on our GTX 1080. I actually put I put the card name the wrong. I put Titan X on it by accident at the start. And this is kind of me playing Doom, right? This is not the way I would play Doom. Like, you're coming out of here, I'm showing off like I'm almost doing it like a PR person would. But there are certain games that, like, you want to show it off. You want to show the gameplay off, you know, as it is. Like FIFA, for instance. That's just you playing FIFA, right? That's not a big deal. But like something like Doom that's really fast and frenetic, kind of want to show it off at like a steady pace. So like, I'm not like murdering through the levels like I did, for instance, on my live stream here on Monday. I wasn't, you know, sort of murdering. Here, let me turn a little bit of volume up. I wasn't doing it like I was doing on my stream on GameSpot, for instance. There's like a kind of a cadence to it, right? Where it's like, okay, like I'm very deliberately looking at things and going, okay, I'll jump up there and I'll do that. Now, this video, I think, oh god, I didn't even notice the thumbs down. I think that's probably because of, this is a clickbait or a mistake. Oh yeah, so that was because the wrong title went up. Also, actually, that's not my fault, because I did retitle it before YouTube got it. But there's also a bunch of people probably downvoting. Let me have a look at the other one to see if that is the same. It was around the same time. There's the unboxing. Alright, here, Hell Knight, for instance. Okay, so this one was titled correctly, and it doesn't have the downvotes, but it still has people saying, typical IGN for not showing FPS counter. Okay, that's just something being a jerk. This game is so fucking party. That's not so bad. A lot of this has probably changed. There's me saying it's ultra violence. But there's a bunch of people even in this saying that, oh man, you can't shoot for shit. Because look, I do the alt fire and I miss this guy about 3 times. It goes underneath him and blows up behind him. But like, if I wanted to put up some pro strats video, then I would have done that. But you're just trying to show off the game, right? You're trying to show off, this is what you're doing. You're trying to get the shots, not all of them stick. And And I think that there's like a middle ground between, like, yeah, showing off a glory kill. Like, I did this, I probably played through this section 4 or 5 times before I used this footage because I couldn't get the glory kill on that guy and stay alive. It's like the first time you meet a Hell Knight, I think. So, this is all to say that there is this sort of, there's this your middle ground between trying to, upload footage that is a decent representation of how the game plays without spending all the time to try and basically make a fucking Counter-Strike AVI of every single game you've ever made of look how dope I am, because that doesn't serve people either. Obviously Polygon didn't do a wonderful job of that, but that's on them, and they're probably going to learn from it. So what John was talking about, though, just to sort of broaden this out a little bit, is that he was saying that ultimately if people are good or bad at games, that doesn't matter, that that it's sort of spiteful of people to be that concerned over the quality of people's gameplay, and that ultimately what this is doing is that it's scaring reviewers into not being honest about how good they are at games. So for instance, he thinks that it'll make reviewers lie about the amount of time it took for them to complete a game, or perhaps in the review that they will hold back on saying how difficult this game is. And to be honest, I think that's kind of a crock of shit. I mean, as somebody who works on an editorial team, there are situations in which people are mismatched with games. It doesn't happen all the time, but there is very much a sensibility that if, for instance, if we get a strategy game in, if there's no one on staff who plays like Civ 6, for instance, we're probably, like, again, this is not me talking for GameSpot, and I don't work on the editorial team, but from my perspective, that would probably go out to somebody, maybe even a freelancer, who is good at strategy games. Same thing happens with, games like Dark Souls. They don't tend to go to people who don't play Dark Souls games. Fighting games, another obvious one, like sports games. Here's the guy, right, standing right here, who reviews the Formula 1 games and FIFA games. And I don't do it because I'm a good writer. I'm a shit writer. I do it because I'm one of the only people on staff who's able to play those games properly. So there's this kind of, I don't necessarily know if this is happening all the time, but there is this kind of, what would you call it, like apologetic swing towards the other side, where you're like, oh, you know what, everyone can play games, everyone should be able to review every game, and because it's based on, like, this is my opinion, this is my perspective, and ultimately it's only my subjective version of this game, that I should be allowed to review this game from whatever perspective and skill level that I have, and I think that's fucking like dumb and lazy, and I don't necessarily think a lot of publishers at places are doing this, but I do think that's the excuse that's laid out by a lot of people when reviews go live. I think game sites have a debt to their audience in that they will try best to try and facilitate the people who are looking at that review. So I'm not going to review a Civilization game if I don't know how to play it, not because my opinion on the game is necessarily, in the vacuum of subjectivity, is less or more important than somebody who is a Civilization aficionado, but ultimately to the people who want to read the review, Civ fans, my opinion is basically useless. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that there is this like sort of awkward, I mean it delves into the sort of the weird, angry blob of reviewers should be, shouldn't care about what audiences think, which again I think is a sort of a weird defense mechanism that a lot of people in the press have. I mean, ultimately the problem with a lot of people in the press, and this is not the case for everyone whatsoever, and believe me, I work with a team of talented people who are very, very good at playing video games, very, very good at playing video games very quickly as well. But there is a sense that in some of the press there are people who are better at writing at games than they are at actually playing games, and I have no problem with those people being put in difficult situations with the audience, because I think if you don't know how to play games properly, then you probably shouldn't be talking about them. Or at least you shouldn't be talking about those games. You should be talking about the games that you are comfortable playing. Games that don't require skill. Games that invite more thought. Games like, there's fucking loads of them now. They're all over the place. Like, you don't need to be sick pro no-scope at Life is Strange to be able to write a reviewer of it. In fact, if you're a skillful gamer and you don't know how to write, that's probably the worst game to review. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of, I don't think John's necessarily being that apologetic about or saying that sort of level of extremity in terms of this argument, but I did kind of want to weigh on it because it's something that I feel strongly about, and I feel almost the exact same about it as I did before I got into Games Press 5 years ago, in that I think there is a tendency for reviewers sometimes to piss and moan about reviewer feedback from the community, or feedback from the games, the wider sort of gaming community. And I think a lot of the time, actually, the wider gaming community is maybe 80% of it is dumb vitriol, which you could just delete. But there is always a nugget of sense in what people are talking about. I'm going to look at some questions here as well before I get on to the next topic. A Stereotype says, if an outlet doesn't have anyone who can play a certain game genre at a decent level, isn't that a sign of that someone with those skills would be good to hire in the future? Yeah, and that does happen. I mean, I don't want to get into specifics at GameSpot, but like, for instance, we had a decent amount of staff turnover in the past couple of years via people leaving, going to, I mean, Kevin Van Ord left, for instance, and went to work at Tryon. Kevin is really good at a bunch of games that a lot of people in the office weren't very good. I mean, MMOs is the perfect example of that. So yeah, that's very much the case. I mean, I would, you could talk to Peter Brown about that, who's our reviews editor now at GameSpot, who manages all that stuff. He basically has to. It's like having a deck of like the Pokemon or something. You don't have decks of Pokemon, whatever. A deck of like cards in a strategy game where you're trying to cover all your bases, and that's very much the case. Like, we have players to do all those types of things. I mean, we have players. The big ones are MMOs, I think, anyway. The big ones are MMOs, strategy games, like big kind of 4X ones as well. Like, I think most of that stuff gets freelanced now. Fighting games is another one. There's no point having somebody who doesn't play fighting games review a fighting game. And then, like, just weird idiosyncratic games like Dark Souls and sports games, I think, are also super important. Son of Fink says, I like being able to know the reviewer and being able to adjust my expectations about what I know about the reviewer. I trust Alex Navarro when it comes to Civ because he has played 2,000 hours for Civ 5. I mean, ultimately, that's what it's all about, right? And yeah, you're totally right, JWL. MOBAs is another one where most of that stuff gets sent out. I'm not sure who reviewed Total Warhammer, actually, for us. Total Warhammer. And there's a bunch of strategy games coming out this year as well. But yeah, Son of Fink, you're totally right. I mean, that's ultimately what the sort of dream thing to do is. But, us as consumers of video game media, we don't always have eyes on every single person who reads reviews. And usually when a game's coming out, you're wanting to read more than one review. So it's good to have like that tentpole review that you're like, super invested in. But it's also nice to sort of have a look at a bunch of other games as well. So Daniel Starkey reviewed our Total War Warhammer game, who is a skillful gent when it comes to strategy games. So I fully respect his opinion on this. 9 out of 10 as well. Apparently it's pretty good. Fair play to them. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Luna actually got it in the chat already. So just last one. As JWL asks, it's not even on this point, why didn't they call it Total Warhammer? I'm very much of the opinion that the reason why that didn't happen is because it's two intellectual properties, and if they called it Total Warhammer, Total War wouldn't be in the name, and also it would change Warhammer's trademark or whatever. And I bet they would have had to have gone through a lot of legal nonsense to try and make that happen. And also, like, the dev diaries refer to it as Total Warhammer as well, so like they're calling it Total Warhammer. But I think that if you call it Total Warhammer and you are somebody who, like, Total War sells to a lot of people who don't buy a lot of video games. They're like strategy fans who like buy a game every 4 years. I know that's my experience from working in the games retail anyways. You get these people who come in literally for that game. Like, super nerdy types who don't play that many video games but dive into one of them. And I think for brand recognition, for those people who don't necessarily spend a lot of time on Games Press, on games websites or picking up magazines, is that Total War is like a strong identifier. So I think they want to have Total War in there and Warhammer, and there's nothing stopping the wider gaming community from just calling it Total Warhammer, which we basically are. Slicker asks, am I going to review No Man's Sky? No, I'm definitely not. In fact, there's kind of a rule we have in GameSpot about people who have done previews for games, reviewing those games. Also, like, I would check myself out of that as well. Well, first of all, I'm not on the reviews team, and that's a big game, so it would go to somebody more skillful than I. But also, like, I know Sean Murray, the creator of that game. In fact, if I might be able to find this, the first ever video I did before I worked at GameSpot, the first ever video I did on my old game site, Citizen Game, was God, it's gonna be so hard to find this. Was a video we went to Sean when they were making Joe Danger, and I basically shot like this little documentary series about Joe Danger. Where the fuck is it? Citizen Game Tube, I think, is the link, is the YouTube channel. Okay, here we can find it here probably. This is my old site. Yeah, it's run by a bunch of buddies of mine now. I just paid for the server. Oh my god, the history of football games got 26,000 views. Sweet. Let me see what else is on here. 3 years ago, I published this video like 6 years ago now. This is like one of the videos that got me a job at GameSpot. It looks so bad though when I look at it again. Let me go back. It's myself and Timur Hussein. There's my friend Claire. Where is Sean? I think it was on the first episode we did this. Yeah, here it is. Here we go. This is really weird. This is Sean talking about. Look at the color grading on this shot. It's so bad. This is Sean talking about Joe Danger 1. This is back in 2010. This is before they launched Joe Danger, and I heard his accent at Eurogamer Expo, and he followed me and one of my buddies, and we're like, "Wait, who the fuck? Wait, you're from Ireland?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm from Waterford," and he was like, "Oh, I'm from like a town like 2 streets over, or a couple of miles over, called Dungarvan." So that's a situation in which, like, for instance, I don't mind doing preview coverage for No Man's Sky, and I can distance myself from that. Like when we did those No Man's Sky videos, like, I guess it was years later. It was like, so it's 2000, so like 3 years later or whatever, when we did these interviews. Like, it's easy to do preview coverage for these games and speak honestly. I mean, honestly, most of the interview features that I do isn't me speaking at all, even though, I have sort of creative control over the direction of the voice of the documentary. But that's a situation in which I'm happy doing this sort of stuff, but I definitely would not do a review of a game when the person who's made it is, somebody who I would consider a friend. So, sorry, that was a very long answer to that question. Yes, Money Dragon, he did look very, very yellow. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about on the docket on this week in games is a little thing called accessibility, and this is something that comes up, I feel, for somebody like me who is a able-bodied white cisgender. Yeah, there's not many things that I can hang my hat on. I mean, every time there's an Irish person in a video game, that's basically is sort of the only individual use case that I have. But as somebody who is able-bodied, this is something that like doesn't come up very often, and I don't want to linger on it too much because I'm not an expert, but I want to sort of give a little a bit of a sort of a starting point for discussion that hopefully we can sort of have a little bit of in the comments, which would be pretty cool. And this kind of comes off the back of this trailer which Sony published a couple of days ago, or I think it was yesterday, about the amount of work they put into Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, which is a fantastic video game, by the way, all about accessibility. And this gentleman here basically got in contact with Naughty Dog, met them at GDC, and talked to them about some of the like problems that he had trying to complete Uncharted 2. As somebody who he's got like significant, physical restrictions on what he can do. I mean, the fact that he can use a controller, considering the immobility he has in his hands, is already impressive as it is. But for instance, there was things like button mashing, and there's a lot of button mashing in Uncharted that was a big sort of barrier for him in completing the game. In fact, he couldn't complete Uncharted 2 because there is a part of the game at the end where he's required to button mash quite a lot. So he talks a bit about like head switches. That's like something that people with physical disabilities can use to play video games. But he talks about sort of the ways in which they could fix this game to allow more people to play it easily. And I mean, this is the new menu option that's in Uncharted. Here we have camera assist, vehicle camera assist, aim mode. Those are all three, and lock on aim. Those are all three different pieces of accessibility, which for instance like automatically look at enemies or swing towards flashpoints for you automatically. And the idea behind that is that people who have any sort of physical disability, who have difficult using two thumbsticks, that it sort of takes the load off of one of the look thumbstick. Repeated button presses, again, if you have like a certain amount of immobility in your fingers, or you don't have the sort of the twitch, muscle reflexes required to do button mashing, that you can set it so it can hold. So instead of being able to tap, you just hold down the button and it does it that way. But I sort of want to broaden this out a little bit, because accessibility is not, it's a very, very large topic. In fact, it's a topic that doesn't just cover physical aspects in terms of, individuals' arms. Like, you've got, people who are like paraplegic who want to play video games. You've got people who have like missing hands. You've got people who have, maybe immobility in other areas where they're not able to interact with any sort of controller. And there's a great charity out of the UK called Special Effects, and I just want to highlight them a little bit here, who do incredible work to set up almost like a bespoke controllers for individuals to play games. A lot of kids, and I mean, you're talking about video games, man. Like, the amount of times like video games help any one of us to escape our situation. You had a shitty day at work, or you've had you're having a rough time of it, and you just want to like sit down and escape somewhere else. Like, you only have to imagine that is probably, even more powerful to somebody who has a physical disability, who not only has difficulty actually trying to like get out into the world, but when they do get out into the world, are entirely defined by the fact, by people like us, by the fact that they do have a physical disability. I mean, it's the first thing anyone's probably going to notice about them when they walk out into the world, and that's the sort of the horrible reality of it. So here you have everything from like very, very young kids, like just heartbreaking stuff, to war veterans who like want to play video games and don't have the sort of ability to do so, considering their physical and possibly developmental disabilities. So like, this is a charity which basically, and I'm going to highlight the YouTube channel in a second, who like crafts these insane bespoke tools to allow people to do this. So this is the type of stuff that like you could never have a Naughty Dog do. This is the type of stuff that is so specific to individuals that the only way in which you could get this stuff to work properly for people is to talk to them about their favorite games they want to play, and then also craft these tool sets that allow them to do so. There's a great link in the chat actually I want to highlight, which Diaspora CHD, Diasporacti, I don't know, just sent out, which is this great site which I've come across in the past actually. Let me just pause column here. It is a Enable Gamers community. It's called Unstoppable Gamers, and it's basically a site which reviews games through the sort of lens of disabilities. So if we look at Salt and Sanctuary here, 48%. There's a review of the game, and then there is sort of a good breakdown of the different types of accessibility that I guess the different types of accessibility that you as somebody who's playing games is probably going to want to have highlighted. So we talked about the mobility stuff already. Auditory is another massive problem, people who are deaf, and this comes across in terms of video work that we do as well, in terms of video. I would love to put closed captions, like put subtitles on everything that we do, and in fact it was something I tried to do when I was at GameSpot UK a little bit with some of my stuff, but it's ultimately for a big site like us, it's very difficult, I think, to dive into that, because you're basically talking about using hundreds of hours of work hours, especially with the long form video that we do. And then visual breakdown talks about some of the problems that people have with sight. And this is, I guess, something that a bunch of different companies or a bunch of different organizations have been trying to wrangle in a bit. So the situation with Uncharted, where you had this individual who had a very specific sort of use case, and then had to reach out to a developer and meet her at GDC to get his point across, that is not perhaps the best way of solving a problem which actually affects a decent number of people. So for instance, this website, Game Accessibility Guidelines, is a sort of a nice straightforward reference for what people can do to make their games more accessible. So let's just look at the basic one. They do have breakdowns of some of the more advanced gameplay mechanics you can put in to fix this problem, but they do a pretty good breakdown of some of the sort of top level stuff. So for instance, for people who have like motor issues with like controlling the game, allowing them to remap the controls is obviously a massive thing, because for instance they may be not able to hit like one or two buttons at the same time, or they may have access to like the shoulder buttons where they can't necessarily use the the D-pad, for instance. So being able to get them to like set that up for themselves is a really, really important one. Sensitivity is another massive one. Sometimes undersensitive, sometimes oversensitive. Then you've got stuff like cognitive. So people who have got sort of mental disabilities as well. This happens a lot, probably, I imagine, with the younger kids who've got developmental issues, which so might manifest in terms of physical and mental. Simple and clear language. Large font, using easy readable font. The game to be started without needing to navigate through multiple levels of menus. So if you have a child or somebody who has difficulty struggling with like interface, which is a relatively common thing, I imagine, especially in young children, that this would allow them to sort of get into the game quickly without needing someone else's help. I mean, this is ultimately what a lot of this stuff is. It's doing this without needing anyone else's help. Vision, obviously a massive one for this. If you're a Giant Bomb fan, you know all about this as well, is color blindness. That's a huge issue when it comes to people playing games. In fact, there's a part in that video, the Uncharted video, where one of the developers on the game changed the multiplayer teams from blue to red. Sorry, from green to blue, which, for people who have green, blue color blindness, and color blindness comes in, it's a massive spectrum. There's loads of different ways you can be colorblind. That sort of rectifies that problem. I actually had a color blindness test yesterday when I was getting my glasses done. Every time I do it, I'm fucking terrified because my job involves color grading so much. That's why Sean Murray was yellow in that last video. And then you've got everything, like hearing, obviously a massive thing, and then speech as well. Simple one here, just don't require speech input. Some games, in the future, we sort of dive into that sort of stuff. But you obviously don't want to leave anyone behind. I mean, virtual reality is another good point to that as well. Touch controllers. Who knows? Perhaps that will make games more accessible in the future to some people. Perhaps it will obviously make it less accessible to a lot of people, especially people who are maybe using wheelchairs and whatnot, or crutches, and don't have the sort of ability to use their hands while they're mobile. I think it'd be very interesting if somebody made a virtual reality game which sort of allowed people maybe to see the world through the eyes of somebody who has physical disabilities, or perhaps a game that allows those people with physical disabilities to sort of shake them off. But yeah, anyway, it's a massive sort of sprawling topic, which I'm sure there are people out there who do YouTube videos of this who are, there's some people in the chat were talking famously about that guy who plays Counter-Strike who's got like massive physical disabilities. There are authorities on this sort of stuff, but just wanted to sort of get the ball rolling of people maybe thinking about this while they're playing games over the weekend. Hassan says, bring on brain synapses inputs. I know, man, that's the real VR. Then we're just jacking into the Matrix. Delicious. All right, let's jump into the next one, the last topic of the day. Let's head to our good friends at NeoGAF. Who doesn't love NeoGAF? Well, lots of people don't, but whatever. I like NeoGAF. It's alright. They're good dudes and dudettes. So here is, Overwatch out on Tuesday, right? So we're all going to be playing it on Monday. If you got it pre-ordered, I think you can get access to it on Monday, which is pretty cool. Blizzard are currently teasing a new short for Soldier 76 that takes place on Dorado, which apparently is coming out on Monday, according to this. So one of the weird things is that recently a bunch of cinemas have started showing off the Overwatch cinematics. In fact, I bet, let me get cinematics, what would you call it? Theater showing, California. Let me see if there's one around here. I thought there was one. Yeah, here we go, watch. It's really weird. So you can watch all of them, I think. Here, look, there's a couple. Salt Lake City's got them. Bellevue. San Francisco. So I could go get it. Overwatch launch celebration presented by Coca-Cola. 9. It's sold out. Wow, surprised actually. When is this? The 22nd. So that's on Monday. It's Sunday night. All right. Yeah. So that's actually like 2 blocks from where I work in GameSpot downtown. I could go watch the fucking Angry Birds movie afterwards. Make it a shitty double bill. Yeah. So that where did I go? Where is it gone? Here it is. So they're showing them off in a bunch of cinemas for some reason. And this is a French commercial, which, this could just be a typo. It could be erogenous information, but it says that there will be new heroes announced. Excuse me. It would be a little bit weird for Overwatch to launch with a new hero. when they've already been selling the 21 or talking about the 21. But you know, who knows? They are going to have new heroes. They are working on new heroes. We have seen pictures of new heroes, so who knows? So this thread is basically a collaboration of a bunch of, or an accumulation of a bunch of Reddit threads and conversations I've sort of been keeping my eye on recently, because one, I'm a massive fan of this game, and I love watching people. Here's Elohim playing on his Play Overwatch stream. I think this is the one he did at Blizzard, actually, looking at some of the classified documents that are hidden in, this one is in Route 66, I think, is it? I forget. But if you look around a lot of the places in the game, there are like hidden, you know, environmental storytelling which kind of points towards some of the other characters. I mean, there was this Diva poster which was famously in Hanamura a while ago, months ago, like 6 months ago, before Diva was announced. So all of this stuff, I guess I'm interested in, A, because I'm a massive fan of Overwatch. I'm enjoying playing the game, and the other one is because when we were at Blizzard, we kind of shot something that maybe we shouldn't have, a little bit. And this is what it's kind of getting into here, which is this individual who this is all news to me, is apparently called Sombra. So this is the character. Make note of the little interesting little design here on the front of what looks like a sort of a robot's mask. So is this Route 66? I think this one is. Yeah, this is Route 66. On one of the tables with somebody playing Hearthstone, there's this picture of this character. There's also this, I'm guessing this is Dorado because it's in Spanish. There's also this one, Quien es Sombra. Reaper has a dialogue line that says, "Where is Sombra when you need her?" as well, which implies she's a field agent and possibly a villain, according to this NeoGAF poster. So the reason I come into this is that there is a point here, point 5, which says, in the first GameSpot Overwatch video, there's a sniper scope with a similar symbol to one on Sombra's mask. So we shot this in the design bullpen at Blizzard. Thank you so much, by the way, to everyone who's been watching those videos. It was an absolute dream. Thank you to Blizzard for allowing us to come in and talk to them, and also for being so honest with us in relation to Overwatch and Titan. I think that was a really fun project to work on, and I'm really happy with the response we got to it as well. And the amount of people that watched and gave feedback was amazing. So thank you so much. But this was the first video to Fall of Titan, which sort of talked about the developmental history of that game. And whenever we do these shots, we obviously are very, you know, communicative with the developer to make sure that we are allowed to shoot here or we're not allowed to shoot here. And this whole area was good to go. We shot some B-roll here, not that much. B-roll is when you're just basically getting, you know, it's not. A-roll is when like the focal point of the edit where people are talking, and the B-roll is used to sort of add notes to that. So usually it's just shots of things and places and people working that you can sort of drop in. And we usually do this right at the end. I think this was done near the end. And yeah, so in the background of one of these shots, in fact 2 of these shots, is this dude working on what looks like a different UI. Now, this was shot about a month ago, and as far as I was concerned, I was thinking that, you know what, they're probably going to release a bunch more heroes, you know, soon enough, or later this year or something. So they're probably not like super protective of a lot of this stuff. So this thing, this could have easily just been a different. They tend not to change UIs for heroes, but it could have easily been, you know, for something completely different. But a lot of people seem to think that this 3-ringed piece of UI is sort of evocative of what you see here on Sombra's mask, which is pretty cool. And I guess the bigger one is this, which is a shot which kind of snuck its way in. This was a place where they were testing. We shot a bunch of interviews here across all 4 videos, actually, with a bunch of the design team, and this is sort of the bullpen where they do a bunch of demos and whatnot. And it's also a place where they do a bunch of new skins, and there was a load of new skins arriving in the weeks following when we did this. So when I saw this in the background, it sort of snuck its way into the edit. Nobody noticed it for the longest time, and which I was a little bit relieved about, to be honest, because I don't think it should have made its way into the edit, even though the guys didn't mind it at all. But I originally thought it was a Widowmaker skin, because the UI here had a bunch of different game players on it, but it had an extra one, but the extra one looked like it was put in to basically just be the extra one, and it was like cycling through a bunch of different skins and stuff. So I didn't necessarily think it was a new character at all based on that. I just thought it was a new skin. But with the latest teaser that Blizzard have put up, a lot of people have sort of looped this all together, and I've said that this character here, you can barely see. I mean, I need to like, I'm gonna have to do some hot zooming on this thing. This is how sleuthy the internet is. So there's like somebody there, like a tiny character here, and basically a bunch of Redditors have put this together, which is saying that I fucking love the internet. Just saying that this shot from one of our B-roll pieces is the front of Sombra here, and that this character, who's using a pose very much like Widowmaker's, is this sniper here. And here's a bunch of sort of references to that as well, to the sort of the wider conversation about this. So I was kind of a little bit taken back by the fact that it took people a long time to realize that this shot was in, because like when I was watching the videos, whenever I watch these types of videos, especially like background stuff, man, I'm like scanning everything to try and see stuff. And there was footage that we had from this area which I did not put in, which had more things on it. This one just snuck its way in during, I will say, is a very asked edit turnover. I ended up putting those together. I edited the 3 of those videos in 4 days, and the third video was edited and written in 4 hours, because of reasons I'll get into it at some stage in the future probably. But yeah, sort of that was the only thing that I ever saw that was like, okay, we can't show that stuff. But I was a little bit surprised that it took people that long to figure this one out, because I'm a massive Widowmaker fan, and even this, the skin, would have been something cool. But I was kind of not sure. I was like, is it a new skin? Is it a new hero? I don't really know. At the time, they were only talking about releasing a lot of new heroes, and I couldn't imagine with a month left in the game they were going to. And, I mean, it would be interesting if there's a new hero here. Whether or not, like, a third sniper seems like an interesting choice, because Hanzo and Widowmaker seem to cover a lot of the bases. Obviously, they're eventually going to put in new snipers if they're putting in 21 heroes, but if it's I mean, I'm fascinated to see if it is this character Sombra, what they're going to do with it. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to talk about it, because it's an interesting situation where something that you worked on about a month later gets resurfaced when people sort of see it through a new lens, as it were. And I think that it's something that, like, it's kind of like that. I don't want to say like we stuck it in on purpose, because that's definitely not the case, but it is that thing where you hope that people really pay attention to the things that you make, because especially in an edit, you spend so much time trying to really fine tune it in terms of like microseconds, and make sure when you're working on an edit, you're looking at it in terms of like seconds, not in terms of, you know, blocks of seconds, which is the way people consume it, because it just kind of comes at them wave after wave after wave. So seeing people dive into this watching people doing this all week has been fucking fascinating to me. I'm loving this. I hope something comes out of it. I have no idea. I have no inside information. Blizzard are very good at keeping. I mean, I kind of think that like they put this stuff in on purpose half the time. Like they love teasing this sort of stuff. They love, like, you know, giving you insight into what may or may not be happening. I mean, they put it inside of their levels, you know what I mean? Like this is part of them seeing how interested people are in the game and how willing they are to dive into the nitty-gritty of, like, you know, the levels and the environmental storytelling. And then obviously as well, the, you know, sort of by allowing us to even shoot in this area, they knew that there was a possibility that something might pop up, you know. So I think that's really incredible, and I've sort of enjoyed being part of that little thing today, or that little sort of thing this week. But yeah, just wanted to sort of bring it up a little bit, because it is a weird little situation. For it to happen a month later is the weirdest thing. Son of Fink says, by the way, this is the second time you have teased the Overwatch edit in 4 hours. You'll need to tell it at some point now. Oh, really? Has it? Is that the longest the thing? I don't think I really can yet. I think I will in the future. Well, basically I had to make them with like a lot less time. Like I thought I had like 3 weeks to make them, and then I got my wisdom teeth out, and then I had like 4 days to make them. We had an expedited release because of something that was happening on I thought that I had that story to myself, and then realized that perhaps other outlets maybe had that story as well. So I was like, fuck. And I had my 2 wisdom teeth taken out, so I couldn't talk for like 3-4 days. I couldn't talk very well, and my face was all swollen up. So a lot of people asked why, like, there's not that much. Usually when they do these videos, like the Witcher stuff or the No Man's Sky stuff, there's a lot of like me in them talking to the camera and like me doing lots of voiceover, and there wasn't in this one. And the reason is because A, my face was like that because my teeth were out, and B, I couldn't like talk properly because of the swelling in the back of my mouth. So the third voiceover session, like the third video, has like I think 14 lines or something of me talking in it, like nothing for one of these videos. And the reason is because by the time it was Thursday and I had this big thing on Friday that I had to go to, so I couldn't be in work. So by the time it was Thursday and I had to get all 3 videos done by Thursday, my mouth was so painful, and was like, anytime I talked for a long time, you could see it on the lobby. The lobby was the most I talked, and after that I didn't talk for like 6 hours on the Tuesday. But my mouth was so bad that anytime I talked it would start to bleed. So I went into the voiceover booth and I had like 3 bottles of Nesquik about this big, like chocolates stuff, and it sounds like such a woe is me fucking story. I'm not trying to say that. I would just say, like, it was such a ridiculous situation because I was in the voiceover booth reading these lines and swigging, and I was on painkillers, and I was swigging like cold water and chocolate milk, so I would just like cool my mouth and wash all the blood down. So it fucking sucked. So when people really liked the videos, I was like so unbelievably relieved, because it was a horrible week of putting those together. Which is also why I think that the second and third videos aren't particularly great. Like, I think the third video is messy, and I that's why I got thrown together so quickly, because I had no time. The first one I spent most of the time on, which I think is the one I liked the most, and then the third one, or the second one, is kind of fine as well. Some good information in there, I think, but ultimately those things lived and died on the interviews, and we had wonderful interviewers in Jeff Kaplan and the team there, Scott Mercer and all those folks who really like opened up to us. So I really appreciate that. It was really cool. I liked it a lot. Alright, so I'm going to open up to some questions for the last couple of minutes here. Thanks so much for hanging out. I'm not sure if this is something people will enjoy or not, so it's awesome to have all the folks on Twitch hanging out. And if you are new here, by all means hit that follow button. Thanks so much to everyone who's been following. I'm not sure if we got any new followers during the show. I got all those recent followers popping up on the bottom of the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, let me know as well, because the stuff where I'm talking about some of the issues in the industry seems to resonate more with that crowd than a lot of the gameplay stuff I do. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for hanging out. So yeah, if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat. First one here, Feather Dave: would you ever consider bringing in someone else to do voiceover on video you're producing? Yeah, I definitely would. I think the reason I didn't on that one, I guess it depends on the situation. I mean, like, all of the videos that I work on, one of the like things that is like really important that's kind of hard to gauge is like authenticity. And when you do voiceover with like a VO person or somebody saying someone else's words, you lose a lot of that trust that you sort of need with the audience, especially if you're talking them over like a fucking 20-minute feature. You need to sort of, they need to be on your side pretty quickly. So I don't think it's necessarily like there are people who are good and bad at getting on their side, but I think that you need to have the person who is talking saying the words, like actually saying the words in those types of features. So I mean, you can do that in advertising, for instance, or like sales videos or PR videos, because everyone knows that it's all fucking bullshit anyway, so you don't need to be authentic. But I'm not really sure in those types. I wouldn't necessarily get somebody in to do a voiceover on a piece that I'd worked on, but I would work with somebody else to create their video and do their voiceover, I think, before I do that. W. Matthew says, with Doom and Overwatch, what do you think of the return of 90s shooters? I will say that was the second part of the Overwatch thing. We called it that. It's a little bit baity in retrospect. I was kind of trying to evoke people's memories of games like Quake rather than and Team Fortress rather than you know, Half-Life or Counter-Strike. But I do think it's weird, right? Because Overwatch is very much a class-based shooter, which kind of feels more like something that we're more used to from Team Fortress 2. So it doesn't necessarily feel that retro. It just feels like one that we've chipped away at for a couple of decades. Doom completely blindsided me, because the problem is, right, you've got games like Unreal Tournament's Alpha, which I really, really like, and that is literally a HD, like, new version of a very, very old game. And then you've got something like Doom, which doesn't actually really play like Doom at all, because you're doing a lot of environmental like mantling, and you're like jumping all over the place. It's basically more like Quake like 2 and 3. And I guess Quake 1's deathmatch as well. So it's like Doom in the fact you've got like keys and maps, and there's a lot of environmental backtracking, and there's a lot of like avoiding barrels and using guns and using all your ammunition and trying to kill everyone before you use all your ammunition. So it is a really old Doom game, but like not in the ways that you'd think. Like if you were to ask me to think what I would think of a new 2016 Doom game, I would think of like big weapons and crazy enemies and like, difficulty and all that, which is like a different type of Doom remake. So with Overwatch and Doom, I don't necessarily see it as like this retro revival of 90s shooters. I see it more as like they've grown up and somebody figured out how to make those games be interesting again and relevant again. And Doom and Overwatch, neither of those are like retro throwbacks. Those are evolutions of first-person shooters, while also being very referential to the past. So I think they're incredibly exciting. Not necessarily rebirth of an old genre, but sort of an evolution of those genres. God, I sound like a PR person. So bad. They're both fucking great. Just go play them right now. Have you seen Koji's full body picture of their development logo? I did. Yeah, it was like a massive model, right? I barely saw it. I saw it fly by on Twitter. I didn't actually look at it very closely, I should say. Any plans to show up in the Bombcast again soon? Always nice to have you on. Thank you, Place. I usually hop on there whenever I can, whenever someone's out, basically. I mean, that is a team of very talented and clever games writers and video people, and Dan, who don't need me on there. So like I'm happy to pop in whenever I'm needed, but they don't need me very often. Dancers is coming back though. We've got a very high profile guest for our first episode, which we're recording I think next week. So that's the first time I've said that actually. So there you go. Shall PlayStation release a controller similar to the Xbox One Elite controller to help with accessibility? It's a good point actually. I wonder how much that does help with accessibility. I mean, you can do a lot of button remapping, and you can set those triggers so that they're digital instead of analog, so they don't press in, but they've shorter like on-off sort of switches. So maybe, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they weren't marketing it at accessibility. They were marketing it like esports people and like pro gamers and like people who ought to take their games to the next fucking level. So I don't really know. But maybe there was a nugget of people in Microsoft saying this will also help with accessibility, which would be pretty cool. I think honestly a lot of people who play, from looking at the special effect videos over the past couple of years, and actually sorry, I was going to mention that the special effects channel is called the Gamers Charity. You can check out videos on a lot of the sort of awesome little use cases they have here. But a lot of those people are playing on PC as well, so I don't know. Some of the videos do have PlayStation controllers though, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe, perhaps. Any idea why Doom was held back from the critics before launch? It wasn't held back from the critics. It was, we didn't get review copies ahead of time, which happens with Bethesda games more times than not. We got Fallout 4 early, which is actually a bit weird for them. It wasn't held back because of any... I mean, who knows? But like, I really, as somebody who... there is no, we did a talk about it on the lobby, you can check out, there is no like one-to-one correlation between people who get it, when we get sent early copies of games and when we don't. I mean, we got Homefront a week before that came out and we gave it 5 out of 10. I mean, nobody talks about that one because it doesn't fit in line with that sort of internet mythology, but like that's the reality, is that there is no... I mean, Doom got an 8, it got 9 out of 10 and 10 out of 10 on a bunch of websites. People like it, nobody got it early. I don't know. I think there's probably two things the case. One, they work with influencers, a lot of these companies, to do paid for sponsored streams, which I fucking cannot stand. And then the second thing is that just sites don't give it to early stuff a lot of the time, especially when there's that much multiplayer stuff. And I mean, we could have played the single player and then had the multiplayer and snap map stuff ready, sooner, but ultimately it's up to the publisher when they give it to us. And we have to do it before. But all this, whenever I see people like at websites giving out that, we didn't get early copies, it's just like, fuck off. Like, yeah, it sucks because it means you have to work over the weekend, but like, it's not the sort of crazy conspiracy theory that people make it out to be, honestly. So I think quick thoughts on Monaco race. Verstappen crashed last year. It's Formula 1 we're getting into. Alt F1, a podcast about race cars on giantbomb.com. Go check it out. It's free for everyone. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about racing. We'll talk about that next week on... Oh no, did we talk about it this week? When is Monaco? Monaco's 2 weeks from now. We'll talk about it next week on Alt F1. I'm going to finish on this point. Best comment of the day. JWL1092 says the term influencers boils my piss. Very good. That's very good. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much for hanging out for This Week in Games. I've been Daniel Dwyer. I will put links in the description for this on YouTube, to the Uncharted video, to special effects, to the Reddit thread the Gaff thread about that Overwatch stuff which happened, which is pretty funny, to John Walker's piece on Rock Paper Shotgun as well. Thank you so much for hanging out. Really appreciate it. You're all beautiful, wonderful people. Have a great day. I'm going into edit. We're doing 21 Overwatch hero guides, which is a lot, and I took on too much maybe, so I'm going to edit like 5 of them today, and they'll be up over the weekend. And we've also got some cool GameSpot 20 stuff, because GameSpot's 20th anniversary is this month. Would you believe 1996 is when the site was founded? So there's going to be some cool videos, including one which kind of goes back and refers to all the classic GameSpot heroes. The 21 classic GameSpot heroes. Refers back to a bunch of people like Greg Kasavin and Rich Gallup and what are they doing now, and also some folks that you may have sort of forgotten about. So sort of checking on them and seeing how they're doing. Not them themselves, just like talking about them. I didn't want to actually go around and interview 30 people. That was too much. Okay, that's it. That's the show. Thank you so much for hanging out, play some video games, folks, and I'll see you streaming on Sunday, because I've got a day to sort of do work that day, so that should be fun. Bob Jones, you've been using it since 1980. Good work. All right, I'm out of here. Play some video games. See you later.